Welcome to Sikhcast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Jasleen Kaur, and I'm a research associate at Sikhi. I'm joined today by Harinder Singh, Senior Fellow and Innovation Director at Sikhi. Guru Fateh, Harinder Singh, how are you?
Harji Khalsa, Harji Fateh. How are you, Jasleen Kaur?
I'm all right. I'm ready to get into sort of trying to make sense of current events, and that's why we're all here today. So thank you for joining us as we discuss the larger Sikh context around the latest events in Punjab and try to make sense of how to be thoughtful and strategic in our responses. So Harinder Singh, you wrote an article about the events of the past month called Pain, Rulers, and Love, Punjab in Chit 555. Before we get into sort of detailed conversations about what has been going on, I just wanted to ask, you were just there. And I was wondering what you can tell us based on what you observed, what you saw in this environment, because I think coming from, somebody who's watching things as a person in the diaspora, it's hard to kind of make sense of all the different sort of narratives that are swirling around. And so, yeah, I thought we could start with that before we get into the more specific conversation.
Sure. I was in India, Delhi, and Punjab, and actually went to Assam, Bombay as well. Um, in the context of Punjab, what I can say is that I was there March 8th onward. I think it was a holy day or a Hola Mahalla day, depending on which lens people look at these things. And I can tell you, for average Punjabi, average Sikh, everything was fine.
Mm.
From that day to March 18th to the last few days, actually everything was fine for everyone except the ones who are active in the Sikh field. People have accesses, they could go anywhere. It wasn't like some of the media where they're saying Punjab was, there's a crackdown, but there's a crackdown on activists. There's a crackdown on people who are reporting on things. There's a crackdown on individuals who are trying to understand and make sense of what is happening. But access was open to everyone. I went to the Darbar Sahib complex. I went to see many individuals, some who are activists and some who work in the governments, SGPC members, and people in administration, reporters. There was free access to everyone.
Mm.
So this idea about that certain people were not available or certain people could not be approached or arrested or talked to, that's just not true. Everything was open. The conversations really need to be about is who was it hard for eventually in the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, that's a really helpful sort of beginning, like foundation on which to build the rest of this conversation. So I guess we'll kind of go in the sort of arc of your article as well. Maybe you could tell us a little bit to contextualize the past month in larger Sikh history, in larger Sikh principles. So maybe we can start with like, okay, how does Sikhi understand the spiritual and the political? Just basically. And then maybe you can give us a rough overview of like relevant history in the subcontinent that will help us understand the past month.
I think I want to just focus on two things because there are people who are talking about Sikhs again and Punjab again. And they are not just Sikhs who are doing it, there are reporters who are doing it, not just within India or within Punjab, but also globally. And one of the things people struggle with, including many Sikhs, that we see that our spirituality and our politics in separation.
Mhm.
That's just not the case with the Sikhs. It never was from Guru Nanak period onward. So when we invoke a Kaur or when we invoke the idea of Naam and Shabad, which are basic foundations of Sikhi, everything is seen in integration. The idea of one force, the Sikh Kaur, this creative and pervasive force, whose culture we live in to identify with that one. And then we use the wisdoms derived from the Gurbani and the lives of the gurus in order to solve all the human conflicts and all the problems. And when we are doing any of that, we are not compartmentalizing our spirituality and the ideas of what the world now calls social justice. I mean, that may be the case and is the case in many religions in the world. And for many of them, politics is a definite no-no. But for Sikhs, it's never been, because it is very much part. Spirituality and politics is like miri piri, as we say in Sikh tradition. It is this Raj Jog idea, which has to do with the rule as well as the union with the divine. So we cannot be seeing and calling out certain political things as being too political. There is no such thing. Just like there is nothing too spiritual for us. Everything for us is spiritual and political at the same time. And the word I like to use is their symbiotic relationship in Sikhi. And people who don't understand it, when we start to see anything in the absence of that, it looks like something which is much more skewed, or we don't understand it because we don't understand this idea of Sikhi. And Punjab is where all of this was practiced by each guru. Punjab actually is very aware of this. Punjabis know this very well. Whether they are Sikhs in Punjab or Hindus in Punjab, the administrations, the police, the activists, the sovereigntists, doesn't matter what their persuasion is or role is or the lifestyle is, they're quite familiar with this. But what happens is people, when they study Sikhs or they locate Sikhs in Punjab without this context, they end up doing a disservice.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think something that I did want to ask you about when you were doing your background in the article to help us understand things, you did a breakdown of sort of the distribution of Sikhs in the homeland and the diaspora, but you also sort of further separated out Sikhs in the subcontinent who live in Punjab and Sikhs in the subcontinent who live outside of Punjab, which you call the Diaspora. So maybe you can take us through like the breakdown of those percentages, how you arrived at them, and what you can tell us about these different groups. I think sometimes, especially for people like me who are so far from that context, we sort of group all Sikhs in the subcontinent together as having the same context, the same exact experiences, histories, worries, motivations, it's just like we simplify everything. So maybe you can tell us how you arrived at those numbers and why that breakdown, that distinction is important.
Yeah, I think I've been guilty of that too, because in the interest of time, many a time I would also say 80% of Sikhs live in Punjab or 4 out of 5 live in Punjab. But it requires more nuancing, especially in the post-84 context. And the reason I invoke 84 is because 1984 ka Lugara, we have to live with the realities of what happened outside Punjab within India, not just what happened in Punjab in June 84. In November 84, it was what happened outside Punjab within India. So the reason I'm getting into that is, I think there's an aha moment which happens for people when they realize that when we say diaspora, we are actually saying people who are living outside India, Sikhs who are living outside India. Actually, diaspora word we know is a very Jewish terminology. But if we look at it in a general sense, if there's a diaspora, there's a homeland. And the homeland has always been, for 230, 80 years of Guru Sahib's training us, the project was Punjab. And after their training, where they set up the cities, from Kartarpur to Anandpur Sahib, the idea of Raj was practiced there by the Sikhs. Banda Singh Bahadur set it up, Jassa Singh Ahluwalia declared it in 1765 from Lahore, Ranjit Singh ran it, and there have been instances of Sikhs running their own Raj, which ended in 1849. So when we say things are too political, nobody questions this. And this is relevant because, throughout Punjab, not just in the world. So sometimes people say diaspora does it. No, it actually throughout the world, you'll see in Sikh spaces, in Sikh politics and Sikh spirituality, those flags from those periods as well. Now, coming back to it, since there is homeland, which is Punjab, in 47, you have new borders in 1947. And this is where India and Pakistan new nations are made. And Sikhs, for whatever reason, decided to go with India at the time with certain assurances. And now you have a new border and a split partition of Punjab. So people, what we don't realize is have lived through 4 generations up to now in Indian side, where people living in India but not in Punjab, which I'm calling Diaspora, and other people are starting to use that term, and I borrowed it as well, and we're interchangeably trying to figure out what to call it. I mean, this is a sizable population, and this is the aha moment. That's almost 17% of the Sikhs are living in India but not in Punjab, in the nation state since 1947. Whereas if I give the similar statistics, people living outside India, Sikhs, is roughly about 13% of the population. I can get into the statistics where I came up with this, but what we have to realize is on about 70% of the global Sikh population lives in Indian Punjab of today, the truncated version since 1966. And about 17% lives within India, but not in Punjab. And then about 13% lives throughout the world. And that's important because the realities of 1984 have showed us we got to also keep those 17% who we otherwise omit, don't think about the realities they live in.
Mm.
And those realities, obviously, for those Sikhs existed from the Guru period as well, when the Guru Nanak through Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj visited those places. But the large portion of that was also the migration of during the Sikh Raj of Ranjit Singh, when he ruled from Lahore, where I was recently in Assam, for example. Most of the Sikhs who migrated to Assam were during Ranjit Singh period when he sent part of the army to fight against the Burmese. So there was about 200 years ago that diaspora started, if I may call it. And then in last 100 years, since 1947's partition, people also migrated throughout India. They didn't just resettle in Punjab, they settled in other places as well. So this is very, very important because when we talk about conversations about Sikhs, as Punjab and Sikhi are not synonymous, Punjab remains the homeland of the Sikhs. About 70% do live there, but other 17% live in Indian diaspora or Diaspora, and about 13% globally. Now, these numbers are, look, you can contest them, but essentially, if you believe there are 25 million Sikhs, the range from Wikipedia to estimates of different individuals are somewhere between 25 million to 30 million Sikhs. And of that, the estimates are somewhere between 18 to 21 million in Punjab. And those numbers are available. Then there is the Diaspora. How many are left? Is it 5 to 6 million in the rest of India? And in the actual diaspora, is it 3 to 5 million? So if I look at from liberal to more conservative estimates, and I did the averaging of that, and that's how I came up with 70, 17, and 13 distribution.
Yeah, I think, that's really helpful. I think we'll get into it probably later in our conversation when we're talking about the challenges that are presented by the past month's events, but that distinction is one that is really helpful because of the contextualizing of those experiences. And the nuancing that is necessary as a result. So thank you for that. I did want to ask, now that we have sort of background and context, if you could speak a little bit about the timeline. You made a point in your article to mention the events of March 2nd, which I found helpful as I was thinking about this. And I think a lot of us, maybe at least in this diaspora, are thinking about events as having started on March 18th. But if you could elaborate on the sort of on the ground facts of what has happened this month, that would be helpful. And then, we can go from there.
So, in fact, before even March 2nd of 2023, I do want to mention that about, I think it was October 11th in 2021, that BSF, which is the Border Security Force, which is one of the central police forces in India, they have a jurisdiction from all the borders, like Indo-Pakistan border in this case. And their jurisdiction used to be 15 kilometers from border. But in 2021, it was increased to 50 kilometers. Now, this is something most people may not remember, but it was covered extensively in the news. And the interesting part was that all political parties of Punjab had unanimously condemned that. Now, it did happen in a couple of other states as well, but in some cases, they kept it the same limit. In case of Gujarat, they actually shortened it. But in case of Punjab, they increased it. But in Punjab, everyone condemned it. It happened 2 years ago in October 2011. So that's something to keep in mind, which means why was that done, and under what context was it done? Whereas you are actually decreasing that in other states or not changing them in other states, which are border states. Second thing which is important is what you invoked, the March 2nd one. Why was it that 50 units of Central Military Forces were already sent in there? Now, this is very, very important. 50 units is a lot, which includes, I've given the details of that, and this is no secret, but what was the Indian government or the agencies or the Punjab administrations and the national administrations thinking here? Were they expecting something? This is March 2nd. There was nothing on March 2nd going on. Sometimes people say it was on the pretext of G20, but you need this in G20, like Pakistan is going to attack India while G20 is going on. Something ain't right here. So obviously there was some preparation, some anticipation going on here. And then on March 18th is when most people are focused on. This is when arbitrary detention started, the mobile shutdown started, SMS services were shut down, not just in Punjab, but even in Chandigarh. They issued orders that you cannot have gatherings, and they kept changing those. So things of that nature started out, which is where I remember I was still in Punjab at that time, and that there was tenseness starting on March 18th. People weren't sure what was going on. And their targeting wasn't of just Amritpal Singh. That's what many people have made it to be, and government has made it to be. But many other people who are not part of Waris Punjab, who are either reporters or students or activists, were also targeted, and they were arrested as well. The point is that they were doing this at large. They were doing this with, not in most cases, the first level of leaderships, but they were doing this with the second level of leaderships, which were not just in Waris Punjab. And I'm emphasizing that point because we cannot reduce it to one individual. Of course, it happened with Waris Punjab. They took the companions and arrested them of Amritpal Singh and sent them to Assam, and they charged them with NSA, which is one of the most stringent laws in India. But it was happening to quite a few people, and people who are otherwise just reporting on things, their social medias were being blockaded, and international press has picked up on that. The internet freedom people have picked up on that, and they have actually cited, which are not Sikh organizations, that how this is violating India's own constitutions and laws, which means extra legal activities are taking place in Punjab. They are targeting activists, they're targeting who are raising voices, they're targeting reporters who are talking about these things. And they are not just Punjab and Sikh reporters, some of them are also international reporters and not Sikhs.
Yeah, what you were saying about not making this about just one person or one event is really resonating with me, because I think my tendency over the last week has been to kind of focus in on particular people or particular groups or particular events, and this idea of, which has happened before, this idea that there's larger things going on, and that the militarization of areas in Punjab, the arrests of people who are not related to Amritpal Singh's group or to him in general, those things I think maybe are being missed out on in some way, at least even in the conversations I've had with other people who are kind of trying to make sense of things from far away. And yeah, I think this understanding that there's a larger thing happening, and that there's not just a larger context going backwards, but even in the present, there's a larger context that maybe we're not as focused on, is really important. And,
Jasleen, I actually
Sure.
want to speak to that a little bit more.
Sure.
So it is about Amritpal and Waris Punjab Day,
Yeah.
but it is not just about that. And the reason I'm saying that is because anytime there is something going on, and there are many people who are active in Punjab, but certain people get certain media presences because of what they are doing or because of what other narratives are being built, either intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes by the state as well. So, for example, there were other campaigns happening at the same time. There were people who were protesting against G20. They came up with something called P20 or Punjab 20, which included 20 other Sikh organizations and their representatives. And they spoke about the similar issues about militarizations, the issues of Punjab, which are outstanding, unaddressed, unresolved, not since 1984, but in some cases since 1947. And in the case of Waris Punjab and Amritpal Singh, he was also speaking out many issues, and he was giving voice to things which many Sikh segments want voice to as well, whether it using the word Khalistan, whether it was about the drugs. But we must not make this mistake of just reducing it to one individuals, because many individuals are participating in many of these things. And I had conversations with those individuals, including Amritpal Singh, for example. And I'm sharing this because it's important to realize that what people do in Chandigarh, and I'm referring to some of the intellectuals and some of the subgroups of Chandigarh. There are people who are based out of Jalandhar, and the people who are based out of Amritsar and in Ludhiana and throughout Punjab. Of course, I couldn't meet all of them, but I met representatives of many of them. And they all were very worried about what is happening currently in Punjab. And it's not just them that they were also worried about it and wanted to do something about it, were doing something about it. Even people who participate in electoral politics are worried about it. But they don't voice it as much. But few are voicing it. As an exception, few voiced it. So the point I'm trying to make is that within the Sikh world, many people are concerned. Many have been on the ground, and they have been talking about how to systematically tackle it. Some were making some preparations for it, even organize public protests. For example, the Sikh prisoners release protest, which has been running out of Mohali area, Sahibzada Ajit Singh Nagar, as we call it. Even they weren't sure about, when I met them, part of their representatives, they were not sure about what they can be doing next, because many things were unfolding. And many of the strategies are still missing, but the emotions are there. The issues are very much there. People know these issues are unresolved. And many a time, operationally and strategically, they don't know what to do. So I just want to make sure that there is a heightened awareness of Sikhs living in Punjab about the Sikh issues and Punjab issues. And I think a lot of what you are seeing in Punjab for last month, since the new Nanak Shah year started on 1 Chet, has been speaking to that heightened awareness, where the administration in Punjab, administration in India, a lot of Sikh institutional administrations have had colossal failures. So in that awareness, certain things got highlighted, other things didn't. But I think what's to be celebrated is awareness is heightened. And it's not just political consciousness which is heightened. It's actually much more than political now.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, you sort of mentioned like politicians and their reactions, but can you maybe get a little bit into how different players have responded in the past month? So not just politicians, but also Sikh institutions and organizations and media. I think a lot of us saw the statement from the Akal Takht Jathedar in the past week, and even that we're trying to make sense of. So if you could speak a little bit about that, that would be helpful.
Sure. I think a lot of the statements that are coming out are more recently, but initially you didn't see much.
Yeah.
Initially, you basically saw the whole of Indian media, if I may call it, run from Delhi. And I think a lot of them, I want to give a benefit of the doubt too. They do lack context to Punjab because they don't have correspondents in Punjab. I mean, many of them have zero. One or two may have one or two. So what they are doing is they're being fed mostly the narratives, or they're basing it on their previous assumptions or their ideologies based on their lenses, which are not from the ground. So I think a lot of it is focused on not actually understanding the ground realities of Punjab, not understanding the Sikh DNA, as I was speaking to earlier. But many of them are also feeding particular narratives and giving those things as well. But coming back to the politics of all this and the statements, look, there were few individuals from political parties as an exceptions who raised concern.
Mm.
But largely, political parties were actually feeding into the frenzy, if I may call it, which was creating um, essentially a bad image of the Sikhs and bad image of Punjab, that something really terrible is going on. And ISI and Khalistan, these words were getting flashed. None of that is true. Everyone knows that. Even the ones who are sovereigntists in Punjab know this.
Mm.
So this frenzy had to be stopped, but it was not being stopped. This tarnishing of the Sikh image, the tarnishing of the civil disobedience, which Punjab so brilliantly in a very unified way presented during farmers' protest, was actually being undermined. And it actually was working. And it has worked to a large extent because some of the almost all of the union leaders didn't say anything about it. And if somebody did, it didn't turn out right. The non-Sikh and non-Punjabi farmers' protest leaders like Takat had zero statements on this because this frenzy became so complicated, right? Because the image is being questioned. Punjab is becoming this trouble spot narrative was being spun, which is not true at all. Punjab is nothing like that even today. And so what you see recently now is whether it's through SGPC, whether through Akal Takht Sahib, I think you can say there are efforts either to understand the issue or to make Akalis and SGPC relevant because their associations with the central government or the non-existence in Punjab government, they're trying to become relevant to that. Or I actually want to speak to the positive element. Maybe there's a Sikh consciousness, which is, as I reflected earlier, it is not just among the people. People are part of these organizations. I think the consciousness is also at a heightened level. Perhaps they're trying to solve some of these problems. I think these are very precarious times. We need to really at one point understand why is it that the larger left, the larger liberals, the larger Marxists, or whatever, the larger unions, they stay quiet on it. Well, maybe they don't understand or they don't know who to talk to in order to understand this. I want to give benefit of the doubt. And same thing with the larger media. It's actually, they don't either understand it, so they're being fed the same stories to create this negative image of the Sikhs in Punjab. So our work is cut out on both fronts. I think the saving grace is that the reporters who are not necessarily part of the mainstream press, although even they covered it very well, the ones who are Punjab based, and the reporters who are Punjabis and Sikhs who are covering from the ground, it is really the saving grace of them that we have somewhat of a idea as to what was happening in Punjab.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I've been, those are the accounts that I've been following, which has been really helpful. I think, in the last 24 hours, a lot has happened, which we talked about before we even started this recording, but a video of Amritpal Singh has been circulating where he's calling for a Sarbat Khalsa, which I know you were present in 2015 at the Sarbat Khalsa, and I know that you also worked on Free Akal Takht and still do. So I'm wondering what your take is on that. And maybe this is, I don't mean for this question to sound kind of casual, but like whether we're ready for that. Yeah.
My short answer is, in excitement, people are asking for Sarbat Khalsa. Amritpal Singh also asked for it. I mean, there will be lots of analysis of these things about the videos and his presence and what happened in last 11 days. Look, we actually don't know. That's the simple answer. I'm not the one who's going to fuel one part of the story versus the other. What we do know is that these calls now Jathedar has to think about. The acting Jathedar of Sri Akal Takht Sahib, who's appointed by SGPC. Now, I think this puts us in a very precarious situation. All Sikhs really have to think about this. We can't just get emotional about this. That every time there is an ask or a call who really gets to do all this? And this is something which we talked about even the last time it happened. Who really gets to call it? How do we make sure the manipulations won't happen? Because this is part of in the Sikh sphere, it is very, very common. We always say Indian government does this all the time, and the Punjab government is doing it, and the political parties are doing it. Guess what? In Sikh sphere, it's also very common. I've seen it from very close proximity and while directly participating in it. So I look at it in two ways. No, we are not prepared. Even the last time with multiple committees which were announced, including one working committee, it never met. It never had any deliberations. And previous Sarbat Khalsa gathering, at least, even if all the Gurmatas are not accepted, because many Sikhs have questions on it, including myself. I think they were Matas, not Gurmatas. Even if you go by the very first one, it actually said the next Akal Tak Jathedar cannot be part of this because they're installed by SGPC. So there are lots of internal issues here, both in terms of the process, in terms of systems, in terms of validities, transparencies, inclusiveness, openness, all those participatory issues. I know there's excitement. I saw not just Sikhs who are excited about this, but some of the reporters and otherwise people who question the legitimacies of Sarbat Khalsas also start explaining what Sarbat Khalsas are. It's very interesting, which I think is the most positive part. We know our system is the Sarbat Khalsa. We know that Guru granted self-governance is the model. But we don't work on that model, on its realities for 2023, for example. And unless we work on it, it will continuously get manipulated because whoever is calling it and whoever is running it, they will do what they need to do, even in their best intentions. It will get undermined because we are not prepared for. And I'm not saying I'm the only one or people where I'm involved are the people who should be, they understand it. No, nobody really understands it. But we must have conversations on it, not when Sarbat Khalsa is about to be called. This is what we were saying for the last 7 years, the team which I worked with, that we need to be preparing such that whenever the next one comes, will be a little bit better than the previous one, because we have thought about it, we have worked on it, and we are trying to build systems to create less corruption and less manipulation.
Yeah. No, that's a lot to think about. So thank you. Now that we've I know that was a lot probably for listeners, especially who are like me and have been spending the past week just trying to sort through things in their own minds. But, in the last part of your article, you talk about the challenges that are ahead of us, or maybe that we're sort of in right now. And you briefly mentioned the global protests that have been organized in response, and you rightly pointed out that emotions are high and restraint is low, that many of us are maybe falling into state traps, or some of us are. Our outrage is coming out in maybe unsick-like behavior. And I've been thinking a lot about this as someone who's just existing in my context in the Western diaspora, and wondering what motivates us to act in the ways that we do. And some of the things that I've seen are troubling. And that's not to say, I don't want this to sound like I'm on a high horse, because I think I understand where it's coming from. And I do see it as a combination of frustrations that I've felt the past week or so about being far away, about feeling helpless, and feeling anger at the state's mistreatment of Sikhs at home. And I think we want to feel like we are doing something, that we are engaging in some kind of actionable thing. And sometimes the urgency of that desire means that we're not necessarily pausing to think about strategy or about the narratives that are already existing and what we might be giving fodder to. And I don't know, it's interesting. I actually went back to Asakiwad last week because that's where we hear about these games, and maybe logically I've heard about them so much, but it's harder when you're kind of confronted with the frenzy of things to remember that. And I've also been thinking about how our actions in this part of the diaspora affect Sikhs in the, quote unquote, Inspira and Sikhs in Punjab at large. And so all that is to say, I'm wondering if you can briefly touch on the distinction that you made, or the implied distinction that you made between internal and external activism, and the things that you see as like necessary steps forward, or maybe challenges that we ought to deal with sooner rather than later. Which I guess in short would be a question you probably get asked a lot, which is like, what can be done? But yeah, that's my question.
So, I was looking at you, Jasleen, and you and I have talked about this in other instances as well. We actually don't know what can be done. Nobody really has an answer. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Because we really are not ready for it. We are not prepared for it. Because, Gurbani says, "Kadiye sabad sachi taksa," that we got to chisel ourselves with the shabad, and this will be the true minting. We are not chiseling ourselves with the shabad, which is the infinite wisdom, which provides us with the answers and the clarity. In fact, when I was writing article, this is what I invoked, that every guru invokes Ikoankar and Naam and Shabad, which are our ethos, our principles, to develop that calmness and that clarity. And we tell those Sakhis, and we must continue to tell those Sakhis that how we sing the Shabad when the battle is on us, right? Guru Gobind Singh said, let's do Asaki War, for example, right? And when Guru Nanak is standing on the pile of dead bodies, he says, at that time, he says, let me speak with Gyan, that with the deeper knowledge, let me respond while I'm standing on the pile of dead bodies, right? So this is Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind Singh, which is very real. But when we are dealing with this kind of chaos or crisis or psyop warfare, which is what it is right now, we actually don't know what to do. Because we are not chiseling ourselves with the Shabad. We are not living in Naam. We are not invoking a Kuankar other than customary speeches or ardases. So let's pause and let's try to do that for ourselves, at least at individual selves. Because when enough individuals do it, we'll bring it in our organizations, in our groups, and then that will affect the collective behavior. So that's first point. We actually don't know because we lack this relationship, this clarity, and this calmness to come up with an answer. Second thing is, look, even if few individuals are unsikh-like behavior, that is not our narrative. That's not how most Sikhs are behaving. So I know Indian media picks up on it and some Sikhs pick up on it, and we cannot dwell on it. There's no way we will ever justify that. I was having conversations with an MP in UK. She said the same thing to me. Whether I'm having conversations with somebody in Canada who's a minister or a former minister or an administrator in India, I can tell you, they all feel the Sikh pain. And none of them will ever justify this. Nobody will. But we cannot make that the center stage either. We have to understand people slip. We slip. I will slip because of what I said earlier, because of my not as strong relationship with the Kuankar. So we need to obviously become, one of the suggestions I've given that's why is we got to continuously work on creating a Sikh response based on Sikh inspiration. And that's where that's coming from. We must own and understand and relate to the pain of our people. And we must, get a little reserved and a little vigilant about our own self behaviors. And if we slip, we need to take care of that, but not make that the centerpiece as some of the media likes to do. So and that's what I was trying to say, because, like you said, I think you were asking me even this yesterday when we were talking. Sometimes we think by doing those things, we are becoming actionable. No, we are actually masquerading that limitation we have of reaction. That is not an action. So now to your larger question. This internal sort of versus external, I don't know if those are the right phrases, but we can talk about that. Look, internally, I don't think we highlight enough people who try to do things about it. because we don't hear enough about it and we don't have organizations who are actually focused on it. But one activism is what you see in social media, countering the bad narrative, the non-Sikh narrative, the non-Punjab narrative. But when we are countering it, sometimes we end up creating not so good narrative either, but at least we are seeing successes of that now. In last couple of years, we have gotten as a collective, which is in Punjab, in Diaspora, which is trying to counter the narrative, which they know somehow is not right. But what is the right narrative? We struggle on it. It's okay. It's a growing pain, and we'll come out of it. And I think we'll be victorious because we are onto something here. But there is, and that's the external activism which you are seeing right now. Internal activism, I think, is really, really lacking. This is where what we need to, I had this conversation with people who have worked in FCOs or state departments and people who need to develop relationships with the governments. And what they say is very clear, that we actually we have not built those relationships, whether it is with particular reporters, particular embassies, particular government departments, and not just internationally, but within India as well. And this part is very tricky because I can say within India, we got to do that as well. Who are the people who will talk to when things go bad? Whether it is in Punjab, current government, or the opposition's parties in Punjab and the administration in Punjab. Like one of the things I wrote in the article is, I don't think we have the context of Indian politics right now. Maharashtra this week is debating whether Savarkar versus Govalkar issue. And they're saying, can we really be following which particular ideologue? Maharashtra is debating this because it is a debate within BJP and RSS as well, which vision they want. They want the political Hindu vision in India more, or they want the spiritual Hindu vision in India more. And that's something we need to understand, and we need to participate and maybe keep that in mind when we are not able to make sense of the current administration, for example. While at some point they show certain affinities, even if it's ceremonial with the Sikhs, but at other points they are creating very draconian ideas, for example, Islamophobic things. So, but at the same time, how they dealt with the farmers' protest. So, and because there is a particular vision, and our internal activism is what I'm saying, people need to really pay attention to these things, because this is what's being discussed in actual politics of the governance and electioneering in India, currently in Maharashtra, for example. Second thing I would say here is, which I can speak personally to, is, Sikh Research Institute, for example, was founded 20 years ago this month. And I remember its first articulation was actually about working to create Sikh public policies. But we end up changing that because, at the time the boards decided within 2-3 years, they want to focus more on education. But guess what? In 20 years, we still don't have any think tanks or policy institutes or people who do lobbying. That's the kind of people, they have to exist, in the major Western democracies, at least, with investment on resources and strategies in order to pursue a specific policy. That happens after you have done few things, after building a relationship for initial years. And if people are really serious, I think we have some brilliant minds who can work there, but we haven't put together that organization, not even a single one anywhere in the world. So when the crisis happens, when the politicking happens, whether it's in Australia, Canada, UK, US, we are all wondering what to do. And then we are calling our personal contacts, which we will continue to do, but that's not an answer. We need to build relationships where decisions get made, where policies get considered. We also have to do that within India, within Punjab administrations and Indian administrations, and really understand the nuancings of all these.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think as we think about sort of long-term what's necessary and short-term what's necessary, I think I don't know, we talked about this a couple of days ago, but for me, turning to Shabbat has been really helpful, and also just having conversations with people where there's not the pressure of having to say something as if any of us have like figured it all out. To just kind of like think through things together has been really helpful. I
But
want,
Jasleen,
sure.
this is where I think another Sikh element will be very helpful. None of us by ourselves will ever figure it out.
Yeah.
This is where Guru gave us the idea of Panch, which was distributed to this idea of what we now call Sarbat Khalsa's Panch Pyares. This is where all this really matters. Because we have not really brought that, we have to accept that no individual or individual's particular single organization has all the answers. They cannot. In fact, when I talk to them, even in this trip in Punjab, the ones who otherwise are on the same project, but are not even talking to each other. And in fact, ask me, can you help build bridges there? So that tells me that we are not focused on project. We are not focused on relationships. We are not focused on figuring out what you and I sometimes talk about it, right? That what is the difference between allegiance versus allyship? And we really need to get into that. That our allegiance will always, the Sikh allegiance, regardless of where we are in the world, for the Sikh, it is very, very clear our allegiance belongs only to the Guru. But our allyships can be with anyone and everyone. Doesn't matter what their political ideology is, doesn't matter what their gender is, their sexuality is, what their level of Sikhi adherence is. If we are focused on a particular project, that's where allyship comes together. And this is how we need to look at Sikh activist work, the external activism, which we are publicly seeing, that they may not be in agreement with each other, or the relationships might not be as tight as we would like. But if we can at least have an agreement on a project and a process, then we can accomplish things together. That's what real unity is. Otherwise, when we are wanting everyone to do everything exactly the same way, it doesn't work. It will never work. It never worked within a group period. It never worked in the missile period. It never worked even 1980s. And we are now in 2023, something which we know logically, emotionally, historically is not true. Why do we even articulate that? So we need to articulate more based on the realities, the pragmatic realities, and the ideals. Ideals must never be compromised, but we must work with the pragmatic realities of situations we are in, the communities we are dealing with, the consequences on the communities based on their locations and visibility both in Punjab and in Diaspora and in Diaspora.
Yeah, I think there is something that you said about the fact that like we know that this has worked in our history and that this is our history, that maybe that's not something we're tapping into yet, but that there's like hope there if we can use those examples as models for our activism and our planning and our projects. I think that's much needed on my end, like this idea that like, yes, we've done it before and we'll do it again. And I keep thinking about what you were saying earlier in the conversation about how we have seen some kind of like collective raising an awareness or consciousness, or however you want to say it. So I do want people who are listening to this, especially who are trying to make sense of things from their context in the diaspora, in the, especially in the Western diaspora, to understand the hope that I do feel from this conversation, even if the sort of the context can be overwhelming to sort of sort through. I'm sure I'll be thinking about this for a long time. I was wondering if, in your article, you ended with Bonnie. So I was wondering if you could just offer that for our listeners, maybe who haven't read the article yet, because I think that offers us another hue of hope as we move forward.
Sure. The reason I did that is because, well, firstly, it's Guru Nanak's Shabad. It's a longer Shabad. It's in Siri Rag, but it is so direct. As those of us who know Guru Nanak or wanting to be knowing even more of Guru Nanak's vastness and completeness and perfections, this was just so direct. And I thought, what better way for us to understand this as to the realities we are dealing with? And the stanza the line which is so direct and graphic is Rat Pine Raje Sre Upar. This blood-sucking rulers, And this is sort of what we feel. We actually say that in contemporary Punjabi as well. The point he's making is, even if that's the reality, and what are the realities mentioning in this Shabad, Guru Nanak Pasha, that is, he says, look, if my body had all the pains and it was afflicted with any number of pains, which we are going through collective pains right now, and that's why many of us couldn't sleep and we are wondering what to do. And he says, and in the colloquial sense, Guru Nanak Sahib says that even if I found myself under the spell of these Rahu and Ketu, which are these shadow planets in Indian astrologies and mythologies, and he says, Paap Garhan Doharaha, which means if I'm under the sinful, if you want to be really classical about it, sinful spell of these two shadow planets, right? Or these two sinful planets, which essentially colloquially means that I'm in trouble. In contemporary Indian Hindi and in Punjabi, they say, when Rahu Ketu is there, which means you are in trouble. So essentially, Guru Nanak Sahib is saying, I'm in so much pain and I'm in so much trouble. Why? Because the blood-sucking, cruel rulers are holding, they held sway over my head, which is a phrase saying that they got me right now, which means they're going to do something which is very, very cruel. But even in that condition, and that's Guru Nanak for us, right? This is Guru Nanak through Guru Gobind Singh and Sikhs of the Guru. May my love for you be evident. Because we do things out of love for the Guru. And this is why we say, whether we get to rule or not, whether we get salvation or liberation or moksha or not, I just want to be in love. And that's what Guru Nanak Sahib is saying, that even in that condition, my love must be evident. And how will it become evident? Because what does he do? What do all the gurus do? What do the Bhagats do? What are we being told to do over and over in Gurbani? Pitu haisa lahana, akhan lahe na chao. That even then, may I continue to praise you. And you and I have talked about this praising a lot. What does this praising mean? It means that I become like the Koankar because I live in that praise, that I, in fact, bring those qualities within me. Whatever the qualities we can understand and feel of a Koankar. And he says, but while doing so, may my excitement never fade while I'm admiring you. I'm excited to do it. It's not a task for me. This is my lifestyle. This has entered my DNA. This is my rahat. We use these words as only as discipline, but really they're love affair. So Guru Nanak Sahib is essentially saying that, look, I'm excited. I want to remain excited. I'm excited because I'm praising you. I'm learning about you. When I learn about you, I can perhaps bring one or two qualities within me. Obviously, Guru Nanak brought all the qualities. I'm speaking for myself here. Maybe I can bring one more quality within. The kind of qualities which we need to deal with the cruelty of the politics, cruelty of the agencies, cruelty of the crackdowns. The pain it causes, if we don't do this salahana, then our responses will be unsikh-like. Our responses will be immature. Our responses will be games. Our responses will be something we'll get used over and over and over again. They still might imprison us like they did to Guru Nanak, but we will not be part of their game. We will be part of one system, Ikoankar system. And I wrote this, I was working on this yesterday more when I woke up this morning, because as you know, the video came out and the world was asking what's going on. There's so many messages coming from so many people. But when I woke up this morning, I looked at the hukum. You know what it said? The very first line said, hukum from Sri Darbar Sahib, Naam mein hi te sab kuch hua. Everything happens from now. This is the Sikh culture. Because I am not in Naam, I'm not experiencing Naam, I'm not experiencing the one with intimacy, the one with the personal experience of the one. I'm not able to understand what is going on. And this is where we can be in any level of pain, we can be in any level of cruelty from the rulers of this world of any kind, including the ones who are within 6 spheres, not just in Punjab and Indian spheres. They all have their agents. Guru Nanak writes about this. These are in different shabads, he talks about all this. The blood-sucking agents, he calls them, right? So agencies are not just of today's. Today there are multiplicities of those. They've always been there. But the way we deal with them in a Sikh-like manner is to be equipped with this sort of understanding, this calmness, and which is born out of love. And I know many Sikhs don't like to talk about this, but we don't have an option. We don't have a choice. The Panj Pyares we'll invoke if we have Sarbat Khalsa beyond Amrit ceremonies. They're 5 lovers. So this is love born. We are the people of love. We are not the people of the law. We will defy the laws to make new laws. That's been our history. But we'll be able to deal with it in a vast and sort of a complex-free manner if we are born out of love. We are born and experiencing now. And that's where I want to take it, because there's nothing else any Sikh has ever invoked other than the Guru's wisdom, which is in Shabad, Guru's experience, which is Naam, and Guru's understanding of the oneness, which is Ekmakar.
Yeah, I think we will leave it at that then. I think that's a good way to end. For those who are listening and who want to have sort of more context beyond the conversation, please do visit Sikri.org to read Harinder Singh's article. I found it very helpful. Thank you again, Harinder Singh, for taking the time. And thank you all for tuning in. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
You were listening to Sikhcast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.